Hello and welcome everyone to Circularity-First Sustainable IT webinar. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Alastair Borissow and I lead the growth initiatives for the Circularity-First group. As you're no doubt aware, we're in the middle of COP28, where global emissions continues to be top of the agenda for the world leaders. Whilst we all recognise the incredible productivity benefit that technology can deliver, it is through the significant pace of IT consumption that these emissions are being challenged. However, it doesn't need to be this way. We'd like to share with you today how by increasing awareness of sustainable IT best practices, not only can you actually be more sustainable, you can actually reduce operating costs and increase your overall profitability. I'm joined today by Anthony Levy. Anthony is the chairman and founder of the Circularity-First group, and he has been in the sustainable IT business for over 15 years. He'll share with you his insights into sustainable IT, why it is important, and the invisible and non-visible impacts that technology is having on the world. Lastly, Anthony will also share with you his insights into the proven methodology for driving from awareness through to execution in order to realize the full benefits that can be derived from sustainable best practices. Secondly, I'll be picking up on the positive financial and ESG benefits that can be achieved. Like Anthony, my background is in sustainable IT, having previously spent 20 years at Cisco, where I led the Cisco Refresh Remanufactured Equipment division. I'll discuss the circular supply chain and what we're seeing with the evolution of green services and circular economics. Lastly, I'll briefly cover an example of solutions that can be developed, such as sustainable hardware as a service, to simplify the consumption of sustainable IT for maximum economic benefit. We'll be having a Q&A at the end of the session, so please do post any questions you may have and we'll cover them at the end. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Anthony.
Thank you, Alastair, and welcome everyone. I'm speaking to you today from the University of East London. Wasn't my original plan when running this webinar. I would like to have done an environment that I control, but today we're launching a sustainability centre, and that includes really highlighting and illustrating the benefits of sustainable IT. They have a sustainable data centre here, and we've got a number of dignitaries, including the Lord Mayor, coming to understand what can be achieved through sustainable IT. And some of the things that you're going to get to hear first. So I'll be telling you some of the things I'll be sharing with those attendees later today. But let's kick on. So as Alastair talked about, as an organization, we focus on sustainable IT. And in fact, we've been doing this for 15 years. And we've been delivering sustainability largely through infrastructure, so from technology infrastructure, and proving that can be delivered in a much more sustainable way. And most recently, we've been asked by organizations to come in and help advise them on how they can go on this journey to be more sustainable. So that's going right into leadership teams, stopping and thinking about that journey and understanding meaningfully and measurably how they can reduce their impact. We have been externally assessed by EcoVadis as one of the top 1% of sustainable companies worldwide. So we really try and live this inside our own organization. And we're very proud that we've got some meaningful impacts ourselves in terms of reducing CO2 and the amount of waste that comes from technology. We are a group of companies. We are founded and our center is in the UK, but we have capabilities and facilities in mainland Europe, in Denmark, and also in the United States of America. So I wanted to kind of just give you a bit of insight into what's happening or what we see happening in sustainability around the world. As Alastair mentioned, we've got COP28 running at the moment, so all the eyes of the world are on that at the moment. And I think it's fair to say most organizations have some kind of carbon reducing goal. They've set a net zero goal or something like that. And really what's missing though is the execution plan behind it, because when we look at the numbers, we've not even yet hit peak carbon. So we've yet to even start to actually reduce the total amount of carbon emissions we're producing in society year on year. So we pause the science for a minute, which is critical, but if we pause the science for a minute and we think about organizations that perhaps a lot of you work in, what we see is actually, even if we're not looking at the science, we start to see that it's no longer a choice to become more sustainable. It's starting to become a necessity. And why is that? I think the easiest way to understand that is to see it through the eyes of the different stakeholders in an organization. So you first of all think about the employees and trying to retain and attract the best talent in your organization. Really, most people are now wanting to work for organizations that have a credible plan to be at least more sustainable themselves, or in fact are perhaps trying to deliver what they do in a more sustainable way. If you think about customers, and that's customers in a sort of business sense, but equally customers in the public sector sense of serving communities, customers are demanding more sustainable services. And even when we talk about the money, and often so much of business and organizational life comes down to the money, investment and funding is going to organizations that have a meaningful plan to reduce their impact on the environment. So if you're a leader of an organization, you're feeling these pressures from all of your stakeholders. So it's starting to become very difficult not to act, to do something. And that's even before we start to talk about government. Now, again, when we look at COP, we're thinking that governments are going to magic up the answers, are going to produce all the laws, and somehow by themselves, they're just going to get us into a more sustainable place. I don't think that's likely. I think we've got to take a lot more ownership in our own organizations, but governments are starting to put in really meaningful legislation that is going to change things. The first thing we've seen is the mandatory disclosure of carbon emissions. So we're seeing laws put into place that are already live in Europe, and we're going to see those laws coming into place in the UK for more than just the listed companies to actually just disclose what's known as scope 1 and 2, 3 carbon. So mandatory reporting, that is going to happen. We're also starting to see, and I think it started in Europe on the 1st of October, is carbon tax. Even just a few years ago, this seemed like a very future state that would start to be taxed on carbon. But that legislation and those taxes is now starting to come to bear across Europe, and the UK government is already deciding what kind of carbon taxation models they're going to look at to follow suit. So, you know, we've got stakeholders, we've got government intervention, the pressure is building. But how does this relate to IT? You know, this webinar is a sustainable IT webinar. Where does IT come into this mix? Well, I think the first thing is to understand that IT itself does have a high carbon footprint. Okay, so today it's estimated that IT generates around 4% of global emissions. Okay, that's more than double aviation. So we all know we should probably be flying less where possible. So it's already a meaningful amount, but I think what's most interesting is how fast that's growing. So the Boston Consulting Group did a study recently which illustrated that ICT could contribute up to 14% of global emissions by 2040. And that's not that far away. So 14%, that would be more than steel and cement combined in terms of overall emissions. And actually, that would probably make it one of the fastest growing emission streams. So think about that. You know, in all the IT that we touch and see every day, this could end up being one of the big emission streams that we need to worry about for the future. Now, when we're talking about sustainability, we can't just talk about carbon. I think we do spend a lot of time talking about carbon, and carbon is very important, but it's one part of climate change and only one part of sustainability. So when we're talking about IT, we're also considering factors like waste. We're also considering factors like supply chains. You know, we live on a planet of limited resources. At some point, all of the resources we're consuming will run out. And we're starting to see some of those challenges in the IT space. But let me really briefly go a little bit deeper in where the impacts come from in technology, because I think some of this is really visible and easy for us to understand. Imagine the top of an iceberg, the things you can see. But there's also a load of things that sit beneath the surface that we probably just don't spend that much time thinking about, but have really big impacts. So to start with the visible stuff, I mean, in use energy, right? All of our devices, we know technology consumes energy. We can see it on our bills, we can sense that that's a factor. But I think often we forget just quite how large a factor that is, how much IT does consume. And if we just pick out one part of IT, if we think about data centers, you know, where all our cloud services sit, data centers, if you add up all the energy they use and compared it to countries, would be the third largest consumer of electricity. So just after the US and China, data centers consume that much energy that they would be the third largest in that metric. It's staggering, right? So let's think about disposal. So you've got the in-use phase. What about when we no longer need technology? Well, I'm sure we've all got our secret drawer where all the cables and the old devices live, right? We all know that. Multiply that by the billions of people on the planet, it probably doesn't surprise you that you know 50 to 60 million tons of e-waste are created every year. Now, that's a problem in itself, But what's worse is it's very hard to recycle IT equipment. I mean, typically at best, 17% of IT is recycled. And even though there are new technologies like bioleaching and things like that, very little of those metals and materials get redeployed and usefully used. So disposal is a big problem, and it's also massively poisonous. So even burying it under the ground, our sort of old approach to dealing with waste, isn't very useful because it destroys biodiversity, it destroys land. So those are the things we see. But what is it about this stuff that's seeking beneath the surface? So one of the things that doesn't get talked about an awful lot is what it takes to extract the raw metals and minerals needed to create IT. IT technology often uses some quite rare metals and minerals, which means you have to visualize what it takes to get them out of the ground. Think about clearing hectares and hectares of forest, our natural buffer to suck carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere. Think about then firing lots of water and chemicals at the soil to get access to very, very small amounts of these metals and minerals. That process just on its own is massively carbon intensive, as nearly all mining is. But what happens next? Well, obviously, then we have to refine those metals and minerals, which uses more energy. And then we actually have to start the manufacturing process, which for IT is quite complex and intensive. Lots of chemicals, lots of energy, and really lots of handing from one manufacturer to another, making the tiny little components, soldering them onto boards, creating a subcomponent, recombining into the end-to-end product. This whole web and spaghetti of manufacture is really intensive, not just in the manufacturing process, but also in the transportation. And that's even before it gets shipped to the distributor and then gets shipped to the reseller and finally into our hands. These three elements of the process around technology have a massive impact. For most technology, the scope 3 emissions that come from this section could be more than the entire in-use phase. Let me put that into kind of real terms. So if you think about a network switch, like the box that we plug our access points into, our printers into, even our computers into, the bit that connects us to the network, one switch could have up to 2 tons of carbon embodied into it before we've even turned it on. I'll let that set in for a second. 2 tons. So we can't underestimate what it takes to make technology. And remember, we can't be too quick to throw it away when we no longer need it. But the impacts don't stop there. If we think about software, and people often look at me a little funny when I talk about software in terms of sustainability, it's the software that determines what hardware, what physical assets we need. It's the software that determines how hard that hardware works, how much energy it consumes. But equally, how we design the software, even what software languages we use, have a massive impact into the overall consumption of energy and therefore emissions of our technology. Just the choice of using a programming language like C++ versus a scripting language like Python could be 80 times more energy needed to solve exactly the same problem, to answer exactly the same question in software terms. So all these choices have massive impacts. Of course, there's data. And we've told that data is the new oil or the new gold, right? That there's lots of value in data. Does anyone remember the stat from IBM? 90% of data, once stored, is never retrieved. It's never used again. It's never analyzed. Do you remember the statistic about data centers and how much energy they use? Imagine if we got rid of all that data, that 90% of the data that we don't need. How much would that reduce our need for data centers, reduce our energy consumption? And finally, in this piece, processes. And again, I can get a little bit of a quizzical look when I talk about processes. Think about processes and policy. This is where our decisions as human beings have an impact into what we do. Think about how, we advise companies. Some of the companies we've advised used to have a policy of getting rid of all their laptops every 2 years and buying brand new ones. Every 2 years, getting rid of 20-odd thousand laptops and getting new ones. Think about the opportunities there to upgrade or to reuse that technology rather than simply consuming it. The policies and processes are everywhere, And they're often written down on a piece of paper, squirreled away somewhere, and not often challenged. But a lot of impacts from technology are locked away in processes and policy. Now, one of the challenges in this space is having the information to make better decisions. It's actually having the data itself to be able to evidence this stuff. Like, how can we know that there's 2 tons of carbon embodied in one switch? Well, in certain areas, this is really difficult. And what we've had to do is actually go and do the science there ourselves. So we went through a process to actually tear down the most popular technology items we use. And this is what it looks like. Literally pulling apart the technology and weighing and measuring the component parts, the metals and minerals in these devices, allowing us then to backwards work through a process of a life cycle analysis where the carbon is embodied and how big that is. So, I mean, obviously, we all need to do this carbon reporting. So that measurement's a good start. But what's more important, we think, is then what you can do with that data. And one of the things we did was start to do comparisons. So here we compared the embodied carbon of a new technology device and a remanufactured technology device. Now, it's possibly not a surprise that the remanufactured device has a much lower embodied carbon. But how much lower is quite significant. So we've evidenced it's around 60% less embodied carbon in a remanufactured device than a brand new one. Now think about that in your organization. What else could you do to reduce your carbon footprint by 60% and still have exactly the same product, exactly the same service, with the same warranty, same accessories, same software, same everything, but that much, much lower footprint? So I think this kind of analysis is really powerful to start to illustrate that for organizations. But I think going back to the kind of the policy, the people element of this, where I spend most of my time now is in helping organizations stop and think about their approach in sustainability, and particularly through the lens of technology or in tech-led organizations. We don't often afford ourselves the moment to reflect on where we are and how important we think sustainability is. And we've built a sort of 4-stage process that helps organizations go through this journey and build plans and actually execute and deliver some of these meaningful savings, like the savings you can achieve through remanufactured technology. I'm just going to briefly walk you through that process, and you're free to kind of try and adopt this in your own organization. So for us, it always starts with a bit about what we've just been doing. It starts with a bit of awareness, stopping to think about what is going on in the outside world, right? Where is sustainability coming to play, right? Why is it important to us? Evaluating it from an individual point of view, evaluating it from a customer point of view, evaluating it even from a kind of investment and value point of view. So what's going on around us, and then thinking through what happens if we don't act. What are the risks? You know, are we worried about government legislation? Are we worried about what our teams think? Are we worried about what our customers are going to do if we don't do something? But more importantly, thinking about what are the opportunities if we lead? What are the opportunities for us to actually make a difference here? And with all of that, you get everyone in the organization up to the same point on the start line, and then you can move forward. And the next stage then is actually to set out that ambition. You probably already have a carbon goal, but as we said, carbon's one part of climate change, is only one part of sustainability. So what are you going to focus on that's a little bit more than just carbon, right? How are you going to set those goals? Where are you now versus where those goals are? How are you going to get there? And critically, think about how you're going to incorporate that into your core strategy. So for too long, sustainability has been a subline. It's been a separate strategy. It's been an agenda item, but it's not been a conversation in itself. And what we do is help leadership teams actually have that conversation, how you integrate it into core strategy. From that, really, you go into the execution side. You're building the accountability, transforming these plans into projects, making sure there is a governance model to make sure they happen, make sure they're funded. Critically, we all worry about greenwashing. We all worry about saying the wrong thing. So external validation is super important, making sure that others are sort of checking your workings. But being really open and transparent is the best way to go here. You've got to be gathering your own data, and sometimes you can just do that on spend, but sometimes you're going to have to do the hard stuff like us and do full life cycle analysis to really illustrate how sustainable your products and services are. And critically, you've got to start to engage the whole organization. This shouldn't be a pet project for a small sustainability team. You've got to get the whole organization involved. And to do that, you've got to deliver some training. You've got to give people some time and space to build their passion on it. And finally, and this is often where people start, is jumping straight in with the actions. How are you going to create that culture where people across the organization are going to step up to this? How are you going to embed it into operational projects? And here's where you start to see the real wins. And when we've got companies that have put $1 million on their bottom line through cost savings, through delivering sustainable projects. And critically, the next step is not just changing what you do internally, but also changing actually what you do to serve your customers, your propositions, what you actually do, and making that more sustainable. And then, of course, when you're credible and transparent and you have the data, you can really use it to enhance and focus your brand. So I don't want to, I can go into much more detail around that, but I really just want to kind of re-emphasize those points once again. Look, even if we're just focusing on carbon, it touches everything. And you've got to recognize that means you've got to look at your entire core strategy. If you're struggling to know where to start in terms of measurement, like starting with spend is fine, but in your core business, you're going to have to go deeper and probably using things like LCAs. As I said, the integration of core strategy, if you don't do that, I think you're going to really struggle to make a meaningful difference. I said our 4-step journey is this awareness, into ambition, accountability, and action. But I want to leave you with the thought of there is so much you can do right now, whether that's adopting remanufactured technology, whether that's just being smarter about turning off technology when you don't need it. There is a lot you can do that doesn't require massive investment. In fact, arguably it'll save you money, but will allow you to decarbonize and have proof points on that journey to accelerate the rest of the organization. And if I leave you with one thought, is think about what does getting this right look like? Well, fundamentally, we've seen time and time again, it'll enhance your ability to attract and retain the best staff. It'll actually fundamentally increase your differentiation with the customers and improve your bottom line profitability. If you're worried about valuation or worried about attracting funding, it's critical. And ultimately, it'll actually future-proof your business, not least of all from government intervention, legislation, and taxation. So look, that's in a nutshell some of the things that I cover with clients, and I think what I think is important. I'll hand you back to Alastair now to talk about what other things you can see on the horizon and other solutions that will help you go on this journey.
Thanks, Anthony. So, Anthony shared his ideas about the challenges we're facing and the action plan. What I'd like to do now is go through how we are seeing the vendors tackle some of these challenges and the significant opportunity for green services off the back of them. And an example of that is what we've achieved with our sister organization around a sustainable hardware as a service solution. Again, please put any questions you have in the Q&A chat session and we'll make sure we address that at the end. So the circular supply chain. It's fair to say that in the technology sector, the circular supply chain is partially broken. And what I mean by that is whilst billions of dollars worth of IT equipment are actually decommissioned and returned to the vendor each year, it's estimated that only 30% of that gets redeployed. Now, that gets redeployed in a number of ways. Firstly, obviously with remanufactured equipment, but also a lot of these vendors use this product for their own service and support mechanisms internally. But there's a large volume of this product that actually goes to waste, which is a tragedy, and that's one of the real challenges. The reasons for this are many, but it's linked partially to the complexity of the traditional linear supply chain practices. Until these circular practices are fully embedded into their linear supply chain, this is going to continue to be an ongoing challenge. The most common form of redeployment for this is obviously how these manufacturers have their sophisticated remanufactured equipment divisions, and such as Cisco obviously have Refresh, which is the organization I used to lead. HP have Renew, IBM have their pre-owned equipment, and Juniper have their certified pre-owned, just to name a few. So most of the very large organizations, particularly in the networking and IT space, do have their own remanufactured equipment divisions. But largely these fly under the radar. And what that really means is it's not mainstream for the traditional channel partners either to leverage. Ironically, since the manufacturing processes are very centralized, this makes them quite carbon intensive logistically. As you saw from the previous graph, logistics are one of the key carbon consumptions in remanufactured equipment. So as we get a number of services up and running on that and the ability to distribute that capability, that's really going to help lower that carbon intensive element on the logistics side of reuse. And as customers demand the ability to consume and redeploy non-new products, this is giving a rise to a whole new financial model driven by circular economics. Technology vendors' traditional business models are really built around constantly innovating. And obviously, innovation requires upgrading to the latest generation technology. However, as we move towards a more software and cloud-driven on-demand technology model, this is giving rise to a whole new range of green services, which will support the reuse, redeployment, and recycling of technology. As you can see, the global market for green technology and sustainability is estimated to grow by almost 50 billion in the next 7 years alone. These estimates, I believe, are considerably conservative when you consider the focus that major technology vendors are giving around sustainability and the spin-off opportunities that are yet to be identified. For example, HP's new CEO, Enrique Lorez, is moving the company towards delivering renew solutions, effectively providing refurbished laptops on demand based on individual user requirements. This aligns to what Anthony was saying earlier about this constant need to upgrade every 2 years. Well, actually, if you only upgrade based on the individual's requirements, you can make sure A, you sweat the asset candidly, but B, you make sure you can actually upgrade and renew products in line with requirements, not just across the board. For a company that has traditionally driven profits from selling new computer equipment, this is a major breakthrough for sustainable IT and a whole new way about thinking about from a vendor perspective. Cisco's CEO, Chuck Robbins, pledged 100% product take-back at the World Economic Forum in 2018. And when you consider Cisco's hardware sales are circa 30 billion per annum, this is going to require a step change in circularity across their entire channel. And to further support this, Cisco is really getting behind it, and they've recently launched a new sustainability estimator tool. And this tool is designed for channel partners to actually look at their installed base, look at how they can upgrade to reduce energy consumption, but also take a sustainable look at your installed base. And that's part of the area where we are getting closely engaged with them to ensure that we can make recommendations aligned to specific customer requirements. IBM is also taking a data-driven approach by leveraging the power of AI for sustainability. They are using this artificial intelligence to convert data into intelligent insights to identify sustainable opportunities for organizations. These opportunities will then be converted into circular economic initiatives that can be self-funded through cost savings and business benefit. So again, the AI piece, once that really gets into sustainability, is going to massively drive this increase in demand for green services. And inevitably, as vendors embrace the circular economy, the new opportunities for the green IT ecosystem service partners are endless. Just like the transition to cloud services, this is now the way forward for technology hardware consumption. So often when it comes to sustainability, organizations are concerned that this could be seen as an additional cost burden, and it can be. However, at Sistor, through our partnership with Cisco, we've developed a new sustainable hardware as a service solution, which combines the circular supply chain along with circular economics to drive significant financial savings combined with the ESG metrics of sustainability. So let's just take a look at how this model works. So if you look at traditional hardware as a service, this was developed really to move the CapEx cost burden to an OpEx operating model, where you can have predictability with recurring fees that you knew how you could back that off to your services, both within your organization and externally. The main benefit is also no asset ownership. So you don't have to actually write that down on your balance sheet. The product obviously is fully licensed and supported, and there are professional services options that come with that to take away the overhead of managing the infrastructure. So that's traditional hardware as a service. What we've done is we've actually taken the traditional hardware as a service model and we've put on a range of additional benefits around sustainable IT. So firstly, we've embedded flexible financials. And the reason we can do that is because the product can be reused. So this embeds flexibility that can never be offered in a traditional hardware as a service model. So we can provide no lock-in options from 18 months up to 5 years and beyond. So giving you that true flexible approach to your hardware that you can often only get from a cloud service. This provides midterm architecture refresh. So again, you get the ability to shrink and grow your infrastructure as required. And obviously in the world where we live in at the moment, which is very unpredictable, this is a key benefit to organizations with their infrastructure investment. Secondly, we obviously provide additional savings, and this is the real power behind the financial side of this. Because we know all of the remanufactured equipment programs that can be leveraged with partners, we can blend that product in where the savings are actually there from the product that is remanufactured. And often this is a 10 to 15 to 20% saving, even on heavily discounted infrastructure. So there's always a saving to be embedded in there. Now, again, traditional hardware as a service models, they actually use this product for their own use. They don't pass those savings through. But we want you to see the real value of the sustainable investment, and therefore we embed those savings and pass that through to the overall cost. And you'll see with a case study we have with an existing customer at the moment, that's why it makes it hugely compelling. The vendors are providing major financing arrangements for green solutions as well. So that's another area where we can provide additional savings. And in fact, it's significantly less expensive to finance a green sustainable offering with a number of partners, particularly Cisco, through their green pave program than it is through a normal leasing arrangement. Lastly, we obviously leverage all of the take-back programs the vendors provide. So when it comes to ensuring that the products are sustainably sent back to the organization for reuse, we work very closely with them as well. So now let's look at sustainability, the whole essence of a sustainable hardware as a service solution. We can design the solution to make sure we maximize sustainability. What that means is as not just looking at the infrastructure, leveraging remanufactured equipment, but also looking at the actual power consumption of the product. So we can look at a bill of materials and actually recommend the most power reducing solution combined with sustainability and remanufactured to get a totally blended sustainable solution. What we then do is we look at the ESG metrics around that, and we provide actually a report to show what the hardware as a service solution has saved, both in an initial investment and on an ongoing basis. And this is just an example that I'll share with you of what that report looks like. So this is just an example which we do with all of our customers on the hardware as a service. It's a bit hard to read on these slides, but you'll actually see the analysis of the saving from leveraging remanufactured equipment. And obviously, if there is a power saving from the solution that's provided as well from the new equipment, we can show that as an analysis. So this report is all getting back to the true metrics-based, science-based measures around ESG. And as Anthony mentioned, greenwashing is a very important part to avoid in any sustainable solution. So we want to make sure that we actually provide true metrics to back this up as well. This is an example of a customer that actually helped us develop the sustainable hardware as a service solution. The customer provides a range of support services to their customers, and they wanted a sustainable solution, but they also wanted a financial model which allowed them to pay for their networking infrastructure the same way they consumed their data center storage. The customer highlighted that IT was a business enabler for them and not an asset. And as such, they wanted to pay for the service in a predictable monthly payment, which allowed them to easily bill their services to their end customers. In this example, it was just for a small branch office, but you'll see that by blending in a combination of new and remanufactured Cisco technology, not only did we provide an immediate saving of 10% on the direct purchase of the IT equipment, but we also reduced the embodied carbon of the solution by 72% compared to the new equipment solution. And the customer got exactly the same solution they would have got had they just gone and ordered new equipment with a capital spend. The customer has now stated that this is how they will be ordering all of their networking requirements from Cisco going forward. So they've made a decision to say, this is exactly how we want to consume, and why would we buy it any other way? And this obviously gives them the flexibility for upgrading and downgrading, and just provides that overall visibility and transparency to their costs. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the session. We obviously are open for Q&A. I haven't seen any questions actually come up in the Q&A session, but we would also welcome anyone who would like to open up their microphone and fire any questions at Anthony and myself. Hopefully we'll handle them on the fly, but or obviously you can also feel free to post any questions as well. But I think you should be able to open up your mics if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, the more challenging question, the better. So come on, have a go.
That's a brilliant question, because actually often what is considered is, well, hang on, is this as good as new? And actually most of the vendor programs, in particular Cisco, which is where my background is, the actual warranty is exactly the same as new. So they have the same warranty and the same support. So that is compelling. So that there is absolutely no difference between the warranty they offer on their certified remanufactured equipment. And I believe that's the same with HP and IBM as well. So really good question. And actually, just one thing to add to that, Andrew, as well. The organizations actually use this same product for their own support services, their own SmartNet support services. So actually, funnily enough, one of the resistance we often get is, well, would I want to deploy this? Is there a risk associated? If you have a support arrangement with a number of these vendors and you ever swap out a product and get a replacement, you might get a remanufactured product as well. So all of the organizations that leverage it, they already have that same product. It just hasn't been labeled as remanufactured. So there's absolutely no risk whatsoever. And in fact, we've proven, and Anthony, you might have been going to add this, we've proven that actually the failure rate on remanufactured products can often be lower than new as well.
Due to the additional testing and journey it's been through, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant question, Jan, and good to see you again, by the way. So this is an area where I mentioned the vendors are starting to change their mindset. I mean, at the moment, the only products that can be supplied by the authorized channel partners are obviously the products that come directly from the vendor that have been remanufactured by the vendor, and that's with good reason. They need to make sure the quality of the product is suitable, and they don't want to have any network outages from product that may not have gone through their repair processes. But what we are seeing is, and this is driven a lot by the logistics element and just the whole decentralization of the remanufacturing process. There's a lot of considerations at the moment, and I won't mention necessarily with which vendors, but about distributing those remanufacturing processes and providing almost a authorized, more local repair process. And this is where we see the real uptick in these green service opportunities, because the vendors realize that a model where you ship everything back to a central location to remanufacture it and then ship it all out again is just not scalable and doesn't work. And you're right, there are, thousands of products out there that are fit for reuse. And this is actually, there's the legislation, and Anthony, you might know more about the legislation that's coming down about the right to repair and the digital passports that are coming out. But these are actually pushing the vendors to allow this sort of secondary market approach, but actually for them to embrace it rather than resist it, because obviously, you can't just have an in-house shop where you only allow it. But there is good reasons for doing it, but I think there's definitely change coming. Absolutely. It's really interesting what's happening with the HP Renew Solutions with the new CEO there, because that will drive, once some of the vendors start really doing this en masse, that will drive the others to do it in the same way. Also, along with the real commitment around sustainability that they're demonstrating as well. You can't just have an in-house, you've got to almost create these additional green services that you endorse and support in order to enable it. And channel partners are asking for it as well, right? They don't want to be totally restricted, but they do want to be obviously make sure that they're safe and do the right thing by their customers. Anthony?
Yeah, I was just only going to add to that what we need to try and avoid is there being sort of material losers in this journey, right? So I think what's really key, and one of the reasons why we stick so closely to working directly with the vendors, is about trust. We need to make sure that there's faith and trust in these technologies. The question from Andrew is a really good one. Well, what kind of what kind of trust can you bring with it? Well, if you have exactly the same warranty as new, that's a high level of trust. If you know it's been remanufactured by the original vendor, that's a high degree of trust. But like I think if we remember in my iceberg analogy, I talked about policies and processes. Well, one of the policies and processes that sometimes gets in the way a little bit is how certain parts of these vendors are incentivized. Ultimately, there's good money in using and reusing technology. The margins are potentially higher for everyone in the supply chain because, of course, you're not extracting those metals and minerals. You're redeploying something that already exists, but the incentives aren't always there. So I think we've just got to be a little conscious and thoughtful about how do we align these in a way that there is no loser, right? We need to make sure that the win is the sustainable impact. The win is reduction of not needing to dig up more metals and minerals to make these products. That everyone benefits. But we do it in a circle of trust, and it doesn't damage confidence. And it really just is a win-win for everyone. Yeah, let me take this one, Alastair. Well, look, obviously, forward-looking statements are always a little difficult. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. But what we can do is look backwards. And there was a bit of analysis done of when Microsoft launched Windows 95. And I don't know, I can't tell the age of the audience here, which is probably a good thing. But I imagine some of us remember that. That did drive the replacement of a huge number of devices. It forced replacement, and the reason why was actually really, really basic. The decision to animate the appearance of a window. So instead of just one image having to be loaded, ultimately 10, 20, depending on how it's structured, images had to be loaded in that sequence to create this smooth moving appearance of windows. That function, which arguably didn't massively enhance society, nearly forced the replacement of half the laptops and desktops in the world. Now, fortunately, people kind of worked out you could switch off that feature, and there were things you could do to mitigate it. But I think it's a really good challenge. What functionality do we really need? And can we get away from this really basic societal concept we have at the moment when we think about technology, that it must be new, and I mean brand shiny new, it must be the latest and greatest, and that forcing people through these adoption curves. I think we've got to be really careful about that in society. Of course, we want to move forward. Of course, we want to innovate. We want new capabilities. We want to move faster, but we've got to be really careful not to be wasteful. So that's a really insightful question, Ben, because ultimately I think it will drive a lot of replacement, which of course will be great for those people who manufacture laptops. But we've got to be thoughtful about, is that really the right thing? And what can we do to actually make sure that technology can be used for much longer, because it's so valuable. So got so much carbon and rare metals and minerals embodied into it. That's just forcing people through product curves like that isn't a great outcome. But yeah, well anticipated, that will definitely be a big issue. I really appreciate you all joining. Thank you so much. We'll probably try and do more of these. There's a lot of sort of insight and stuff to share, and we'd love any input on your own journeys. If you're finding some ways to be more sustainable through technology, we'd love to capture that and share some of that with future audiences. So please feel free to share, and of course reach out with us if you have any questions or would like further insight.
Brilliant. Thank you all for your time.